Good morning, brethren, and welcome to our program entitled A Glance at the Word, which is broadcast live every Monday and every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. West Africa time, which is GMT +1. Today, Monday, the 29th of March 2021, our topic is entitled The Mystery of the Blood on the Cross. And this is part 3, because we started this topic last week. And you remember last Wednesday, the 24th of March 2021, we started unveiling the mystery that is hidden behind this notion of the blood on the cross. We particularly explained how the way that the children of Israel were encamping in the wilderness while they were going from Egypt to Canaan, how that way that they were encamping was a very clear image of the blood on the cross. Today we will go a little bit deeper in that explanation. So let's first read the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verses 2 to 4. Numbers, chapter 24, verses 2 to 4. We read, "And Balaam raised his eyes and saw Israel encamped according to their tribes, and the Spirit of God came upon him. Then he took up his oracle and said, The utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, the utterance of the man whose eyes are opened, the utterance of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes wide open." This is what Balaam said when he saw Israel encamping in the wilderness. So what did Balaam exactly see? Even though the Bible doesn't state clearly where Balaam was standing according to the encampment of Israel, I'm convinced that Balaam was standing east of the encampment. He was standing east of the encampment of the children of Israel, and it is from there that he saw how Israel was encamping in the wilderness. So from where he was, from the high place, because he was high, from that high place where he was, Balaam saw the people of Israel encamped according to their tribes. And remember how the tribes were encamping. In the middle of the encampment was the tabernacle of testimony, the tabernacle of meeting. And north of the tabernacle were in a row the camps of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, with 157,600 people. East of the tabernacle were the camps of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, with 186,400 people. South of the tabernacle were the camps of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, with 151,450 people. And west of the tabernacle were the camps of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, with a total of 108,100 people. Now, where Balak was standing, where Balaam was standing, east of that encampment, how was he seeing that encampment? He was seeing a cross. He was seeing Israel encamping in the form of a cross. And in front of him, in front of Balaam, he saw the head of the cross made of the camps of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin with 108,100 people. And the leg of the cross, what was the longest beam, he saw the camps of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun with 186,400 people. Now, the left arm of the cross was made of the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali with a total of 157,600 people. And the right arm of the cross was made of the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad with 151,400 people. So this was similar to the cross of Jesus Christ. So Balaam saw a cross, and in the middle, just at the junction between the horizontal and the vertical beams, was the tabernacle of meeting, where all the sacrifices were being offered, where the blood of the sacrifices was being shed. So Balaam saw the blood on the cross. That is what Balaam saw. Balak, who was by Balaam, saw physically the same encampment, but he didn't understand anything about what he was seeing, because the Spirit of God was not with him. The Spirit of God was with Balaam, but not with Balak. So Balak couldn't see what Balaam was exactly seeing. So Balak couldn't see the encampment of Israel the way Balaam saw it. Only a prophet could see the people of Israel the way that Balaam saw Israel. Only somebody who was able to see the vision of the Almighty, the vision of God, the vision of the Lord, could see the encampment of the children of Israel the way that Balaam saw it. And Balaam, as we know, was a prophet of God, because God was talking to him the way he was talking to any of the prophets later on. So Balaam was a prophet of God who was able not only to hear clearly the words that God was saying, but also to see exactly what God himself was seeing and the way that God was seeing it. That is why Balaam could say what he said. Now, what did Balaam exactly see? Because he saw the encampment the same way that Balak saw it, but he said something else. So what did he exactly see? Or how did Balaam see the encampment of the children of Israel when he looked at it? Let's read in the same book of Numbers. This time we're going to read chapter 23. Numbers chapter 23. We're going to read a number of verses. First, verse 8, then verse 9, then verse 21, 22, and 23. Numbers chapter 23, verse 8, verse 9, verse 21, verse 22, verse 23. So let's read them. Numbers chapter 23, verses 8 and 9. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how shall I denounce what the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Now, verses 21 to 23. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. For there is no sorcery against Jacob, nor any divination against Israel. It now must be said of Jacob and of Israel, oh, what God has done. So before we know what Balaam saw, let us first consider what he said after seeing the encampment of the children of Israel. So Balaam said three very important things. First thing he said, curse cannot reach Israel. Curse cannot reach Israel. Second thing that he said, God sees no sin and no iniquity in Israel. God sees no sin and no iniquity in Israel. And the third thing that he said, sorcery has no effect on the children of Israel. Sorcery has no effect on the children of Israel. Now, how could Balaam assert all this? How could he say that? We know that the people of Israel were sinning, but how could he say that God did not see sin in Israel? How could he say that? It is because of what God allowed him to see when he was looking at the encampment of Israel. So as we said, God saw a cross similar to the cross of Jesus Christ. He saw that cross covering completely the children of Israel. And he saw blood on that cross. He saw blood on that cross. In other words, the children of Israel were all under the cross on which there was blood. So all the children of Israel were hiding under that cross on which there was blood. So every time that God looked down at the children of Israel, God only saw the blood on the cross. He didn't see the people of Israel themselves to see the sins that they were committing or the iniquity in which they were involved. He only saw the cross that was over them and the blood that was over that cross. So every time that God looked down at the people of Israel, at the children of Israel, while they were encamping in the wilderness, he saw the blood on the cross. The cross was covering them, and the blood was covering their sins, and that same blood was giving them protection, or the blood on the cross was giving them protection against curse, protection against sorcery. This is why Balaam, who was able to see exactly what God was seeing, who was able to see exactly the way God sees. This is why Balaam was able to say that curse could not reach Israel. Because when curse was to come, that curse would be stopped by the blood on the cross that was over the children of Israel. So curse could not reach them as long as they were under that cross. Curse could not reach them. This is also why Balaam could say that God sees no iniquity in Israel, that God sees no wickedness in Israel. Why? Because what Balaam saw was exactly what God was seeing, which is that he saw the blood on the cross covering the people of Israel. So that blood on the cross covering the children of Israel was covering the sins of the children of Israel in such a way as God could not see those sins. He could only see the blood of the sacrifices on the cross. This is what he saw. And if Balaam could say that sorcery had no effect on the children of Israel, it was because he saw exactly the blood on the cross covering the children of Israel. So any sorcery or any divination that would come, any sorcery or any divination that would come, would meet that blood on the cross. It would not go down to the children of Israel. It would be stopped by that cross covering the children of Israel with blood on it. So the blood on the cross brought protection to the children of Israel. It brought rescue, it brought salvation in a way over the children of Israel. This was the mystery of the blood on the cross for the children of Israel. So we have unveiled part of the mystery of the blood on the cross. Now, I think everybody can understand what was the consequence of the blood on the cross for the children of Israel. But we are not the children of Israel, of course. Or I know that some of you following me now are children of Israel, but not all of us are children of Israel. But we too benefit from the blood on the cross. But this one, we're going to talk about it on Wednesday. This coming Wednesday, we will unveil the mystery of the blood on the cross for Christians, for the New Testament people. God bless you abundantly beyond all your expectations, and have a blessed week.